Leland is joining us live right now from Texas, host of On Balance, co-anchor of NewsNation's Prime Special Coverage. Leland, listening to Allie, I just want to make it really clear. There were some reports that members of law enforcement were breaking windows. There were other reports that dads were rushing, some barefoot, some in suits, breaking out windows to try to pull out their kids. Can you just clarify that a little bit?
Quite frankly, we don't know. Both may be true, that parents rushed to try to break out windows and that law enforcement broke out windows. It's so difficult in the first 24 to 48 hours to know exactly what happened. And you said that it took an hour for example, from the time that the shooter arrived at the school until he was killed. We don't really know what that hour entails. It was an hour from the time that Salvador Romas shot first shot his grandmother to the time he was dead. Is it an hour from when he arrived at the school to when he was dead? There's discussion that there was difficulty getting into the door of the classroom. Well, the people who showed up didn't have breaching equipment. The Border Patrol agent who was shot ran in without even changing into his tactical gear. How do we know that? Because he was shot and a bullet grazed his head and cut through his baseball hat. He was off duty. So the desire for sort of the granular details is understandable, but our ability to provide those conclusively is really lacking in the first 24 or 48 hours or something like this. I talked to a number of sources at the Texas Department of Public Safety who said they simply don't yet have the minute-by-minute timeline here, Adrienne. So to try and nail that down and make these broad, sweeping statements about exactly what happened, or was there a delay, and in some way saying that police may or may not have rushed in exactly as soon as they could have, is very difficult to do at this point.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, in all fairness, the fact is that when something like this happens, none of us can really understand all of the tactical measures that have to go in to having to address a school shooting, barricaded children inside of a classroom. There were reports that members of a small elite team of the Border Patrol agents who were in that area responded and had children who attended school here, some of them hearing that their kids were missing. Do you know any more about that?
Sure. Uvalde is a very small town, 16,000 people. It's also a border town. So there's a sort of an outsized amount of law enforcement and federal law enforcement in that town. When the initial calls for help went out, it came from the school resource officer because the gunman had crashed his car and then ran into the school. We don't know whether they exchanged gunfire. We do have video of the gunman firing at law enforcement outside of the school. The all call went out for help over the radio, and a number of law enforcement responded. State troopers responded, local sheriff, local police, as well as off-duty Border Patrol agents and on-duty Border Patrol agents. Among them were people who were members of what's called BORTAC, which is the Border Patrol Special Operations Team, their tactical team, which is their SWAT team. And that's some of the group that went in. And as we said, evidenced by the fact that they were shot, one of them was shot through the baseball hat, tells you that despite the fact that they had tactical gear with them, the full kit of SWAT gear that we usually see SWAT teams wearing, they didn't bother to put it on from a timing perspective so they could go in quicker, which sort of speaks to the chaos that happens. The other thing that we know in terms of how these situations unfold and eyewitness accounts unfold, and certainly parents would be desperate for anything. I spoke to a number of them saying, how these seconds stretched into hours. The time compresses and expands during times like this. So we have to be really careful when we hear from parents who say, oh, the police were waiting, they were standing around for 40 minutes. You really have to wait until you get actually the data, which we will have, and which the Texas Rangers are going through right now. We understand. I hope to get a little bit more from our sources later today on that.
All right, Leland, thank you so much. We'll check back in with you a little bit later, and he will have live reports throughout the day from Uvalde on television, on cable. You can find us, obviously, on your cable station or on YouTube TV or Hulu. You can join him for On Balance at 7 Eastern, 6 Central Time. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.